Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone for joining us for our latest Owen Mitchell webinar. My name is Nicola Meyer, and I'm a partner and head of Owen Mitchell's Southampton Asbestos team, and I'll be hosting today's webinar entitled Navigating Your Way Through a Mesothelioma Diagnosis. As we all know, 2020 has been a rather challenging year for everyone, but it has been even more difficult for patients whose lives have been turned upside down following a diagnosis with mesothelioma. I'm so grateful to our speakers, Anne Moylan, Sarah Rowcliffe, Lynn Squibb and Helen Wilkes for taking the time to join us today, bringing our clients, communities and colleagues together and providing us with practical tips and advice to help patients and their families find support and guidance and know what to expect each step of the way. Anne Moylan and Helen Wilkes are mesothelioma clinical nurse specialists and will be giving an update on clinical trials and what to expect following a diagnosis with mesothelioma. Lynn Squibb is co-founder of the charity HASAG and will be explaining more about how they provide support, guidance and information to people with asbestos diseases. And finally, Sarah Rowcliffe is a charity ambassador and accredited Macmillan trainer who will be talking about the emotional and practical support available to cancer patients. Before we start, just some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards to view. If I could just ask anyone joining us to please put yourselves on mute to reduce any background noise, that would be much appreciated. There is a chat function available during the webinar if you'd like to submit any questions to our speakers throughout the session, and we'll do our very best to answer them at the end. When you submit your question, do please include your name and email address, so if we don't get to your question, we can respond directly after the webinar. I'm delighted to introduce you to our first speaker, Helen Wilkes, who will be talking about what to expect following a diagnosis of mesothelioma. Helen is a mesothelioma clinical nurse specialist. She trained at the University of Southampton and has worked for over 10 years with lung cancer and mesothelioma patients, including 5 years as a lung cancer specialist. Previously, Helen was a chemotherapy nurse for the Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, and in 2018, she was appointed as mesothelioma clinical nurse specialist with a particular focus on helping armed forces personnel and veterans, and is based at Southampton General Hospital. Over to you, Helen.
Hello. I'm sure that a real concern for all of you is how COVID-19 and the pandemic has affected access to healthcare, especially when you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma. You'll be aware that there were huge disruptions in all sorts of healthcare services during the peak of the coronavirus pandemic, and healthcare professionals have been doing everything that they can and working very hard to get things up and running again. I spoke to some of my patients and they said that during the initial COVID-19 lockdown, they felt very scared about having to come to hospital. As their mesothelioma nurse, I was there to reassure them of the new processes put in place to minimise their risk to enable them to access treatment. All NHS hospitals had plans in place in case of a pandemic, and during the first wave of coronavirus, most hospitals were able to provide treatment for those that needed it. Hospitals had systems in place to make the hospital environment as safe as possible. For example, in Southampton General, my hospital, they've split their hospital into hot and cold sites so that COVID-19 patients are treated in the hot half and patients who are COVID-19 negative are treated in the cold part of the hospital. Members of staff are only allowed to work in the designated half of the hospital to avoid cross-contamination. Every hospital is working differently to minimise risk to the public and their staff. Some smaller district hospitals have been kept COVID-free and will not treat any patients who have COVID-19 and instead are focusing on planned operations such as cancer surgery and hip and knee surgery. This is to reduce the risk of patients who are receiving normal care becoming infected with COVID-19 whilst on the wards or coming in for tests. Southampton and many other hospitals have moved their chemotherapy units from in the hospital to private hospitals, or they've ensured that their cancer centres are COVID-free. Some surgery is now performed in private hospitals or COVID-free small hospitals, or in the cold parts of the hospital. The main aim of each hospital is to prevent anyone from getting coronavirus from the hospital environment. If someone has to attend A&E All patients are swabbed and are not transferred to a ward until the swab result is back. In the emergency oncology departments, all patients are swabbed on arrival, and if they need to be admitted, then this is not done until the swab result is back. To minimise the risk in the hospital, we've reduced face-to-face contact, and we've done this by offering telephone or video consultations, particularly in follow-up appointments and pre-treatment consultations. For example, appointments when someone is diagnosed with a cancer and before treatment, they're often face-to-face, but then follow-up appointments are offered via telephone or video where it is possible to do so. Consent for treatment can often now be done remotely, and we've been cutting non-essential face-to-face follow-up appointments. We've been using home delivery services for medicines, and we've also introduced some drive-through pickup points for medicines. We've been using local services for blood tests if possible to avoid people from coming into the main hospital. Patients can often have their chest x-rays at smaller district hospitals instead of coming into the main hospital environment. We've been asking patients to attend appointments without family members or carers. I know that's really difficult, but we need that to reduce the risk of contracting or spreading the infection. When a patient arrives at the hospital, they will be allowed only to enter the building if they have an appointment. They will often have their temperature checked on arrival and ask some questions about whether they have recently experienced any COVID symptoms. They will also be asked to wear a mask if they're able to do this before being allowed in the hospital. Social distancing in the hospital is actively encouraged, as is frequent hand washing. Face coverings are worn in hospital corridors and places where it is not possible to be socially distanced. We've also tried to minimise time in the waiting area by careful scheduling of the appointments, encouraging patients not to arrive too early, and some departments are able to text patients when they're ready to see them, and they can then wait in their car, for example. Many healthcare professionals like myself are working from home where it is possible to do so. All patients are COVID tested before surgery and before chemo, and staff like myself are tested regularly. Patients who are about to have surgery are also asked to self-isolate for 7 days before their planned surgery, and they will be tested for COVID-19 48 hours beforehand. Only patients who have self-isolated for 7 days and have a negative test can be admitted to the designated facilities. With regard to treatment, all patients are considered for treatment on an individual basis. Risks and benefits of treatment or change in treatment will be discussed with them and their families and their carers. Some patients wish to have a treatment break. Also, some big news recently is that NICE has agreed for new cancer treatments that do not suppress the immune system, such as in mesothelioma, second-line nivolumab immunotherapy. This can now be offered on the NHS for a limited period of time during the pandemic. Some of my patients have told me now that when they come to the hospital and have seen not many people there, and the precautions that the hospitals are taking, such as segregating the hospital into hot and cold parts and healthcare professionals being tested regularly, they've said to me that this has given them confidence and peace of mind. They feel that their risk is being minimised, as the public are not allowed to enter the hospital unless they have an appointment. No visitors allowed on the ward except in special cases, and they're only allowed to accompany a patient to hospital if they need support. My patients have told me that my role as a mesothelioma nurse is very important to them. They've said that I offer reassurance as I'm there to answer any questions, and this puts them at ease. If they're attending an appointment alone, I'm there if possible to support them. I visit them if they're admitted to the ward and liaise with their family members and make sure that my patients are able to contact their loved ones, and I will update them also. Charities such as Mesothelioma UK and HASAG are here to support you, and they will help alleviate any anxiety that you fear and may have about COVID-19. If you do not have a Mesothelioma UK nurse specialist like myself, your lung cancer nurse specialist is there to help you. if you need to speak to a mesothelioma UK nurse specialist, then you can contact the Mesothelioma UK information line on 0800 169 2409, and the Mesothelioma UK nurse specialist will call you back. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Helen. That was really interesting to hear how you're coping with it all at Southampton General, and hopefully that will reassure people listening as well. That was really, really helpful. Thank you. So perhaps we could now move on to our second speaker, Lynn Squibb, who will be talking about the support and assistance which HASAG provides. Lynn co-founded HASAG in 2006 and has been pivotal in raising the profile of asbestos-related disease across the region, closely with lung cancer nurses in many hospitals to ensure patients and their families are seen quickly after diagnosis. Lynn is currently on the committee for Mesothelioma UK Advisory Group and is Vice Chair for Asbestos Victim Support Groups Forum. She's been instrumental in fundraising for research and support of all asbestos disease sufferers, and is extremely proud that HASAG is able to fund a Mesothelioma UK Nurses Specialist post. Over to you, Lynn. Oh, I think you're on mute, Lynn.
Sorry. Thanks, Nicola. My journey started back in 2006 with HASAG after we lost our father to mesothelioma. My sister and I felt that there was little support for us during our very difficult journey. He was diagnosed in February 2005 and passed away just before Christmas of the same year. During that time, we received no support whatsoever. He wasn't offered any treatment. He wasn't referred to palliative care. He wasn't known to his local hospice. And it was a very isolating and lonely journey for us as a family. After we lost our father, my sister and I decided that it would be really important to reach out to our local community because it was in an area of high prevalence of mesothelioma. And we started a support group for not just mesothelioma patients, but also for people diagnosed with any other type of asbestos-related disease. And to cut an extremely long story short, in that time, the Coffee Morning has snowballed into a much bigger organisation that offers a variety of support for mesothelioma patients. We've registered as a charity. We offer coffee mornings throughout the region. We visit patients at home where we fill out forms for all different types of benefits. We've just recently started a counselling service that helps patients, their loved ones and carers with talking therapies. And we've worked closely with the Department of Work and Pensions to ensure that patients receive all of the benefits that they're entitled to in a timely fashion. We are also really proud that we've worked really closely with not just mesothelioma nurse specialists across the region, but lung cancer nurse specialists too. And we reach out to them on a regular basis to help support mesothelioma patients shortly after diagnosis. And we now speak to on a regular basis nurses in over 90 hospitals across the region. We also fund nurses to go to educational events so that they can learn good and new initiatives and bring those initiatives back to their settings, which improves patient experience shortly after diagnosis. We also campaign and have run some various judicial reviews, and we're extremely proud as well to be able to say that we've donated over £700,000 towards research and funding mesothelioma nurse specialists. So we part fund Anne Moylan and Helen Wilkes, and we're just about to fund a third mesothelioma UK nurse in the east of England. We're also part of a bigger organisation called the Asbestos Victim Support Group Forum, which is an umbrella organisation for all bona fide support groups throughout the whole of the UK. And this is where we campaign collectively nationwide to support people that have been affected by asbestos-related diseases. We're all either charities or not-for-profit organisations, and we work closely together for the same aim. The benefit service that we provide is quite comprehensive, so we look at the family as a whole to ensure that a mesothelioma patient and their family receive benefits that they're entitled to. I'm not going to dwell too much on all the different types of benefits that people are entitled to, but there are some weekly benefits, one-off lump sum payments that we're able to get for people, and we will fill all forms out for them when we visit them at home. We're also really proud that Lisa in our office works closely with Mesothelioma UK, so she works 2.5 days a week as the Armed Forces Specialist Welfare Benefits Advisor. So she then liaises with mesothelioma patients and Veterans UK to ensure that those patients receive a lump sum payment or a pension from Veterans UK. She bridges the gap and makes things much easier for people shortly after a diagnosis. HASAG's response to COVID-19 has meant that we're still offering the exact same service that we always have done, but not face-to-face. So our service hasn't stopped, it's continued throughout this terrible period. We're able to offer a telephone service to complete and fill all forms out for anybody that contacts us with an asbestos-related disease. Our coffee mornings have gone on to Zoom, and we have 2 coffee mornings a month where patients newly diagnosed and some that we've had joining us for months and months are able to talk with one another, and we have specialist solicitors that join us to help with any queries or problems people are having with claims, and always a mesothelioma nurse specialist there with us too. And I think that's really helpful for patients because they sometimes feel it's difficult to have a proper chat with the nurses in clinic. We also have a closed virtual coffee morning on our Facebook page where patients are able to share information with one another and their experiences and the odd joke and quizzes. It's a really nice place to be able to interact with other patients. And we've been able to provide a 24-hour social media support network as well. We also work closely with visitors across the region so that we can ensure that patients receive compensation in a timely fashion. And we've worked closely with those for a number of years. And the solicitors that are on our panel are quite specific in the work that they do. And we have a strict criteria for them to be able to work closely with us. We also, and very sadly, work with coroners across our region too, and we help support families after they've lost a loved one to an asbestos-related disease and help them walk very carefully through the coronial system to ensure that patients' families receive the correct information, and the coroner also has all of the information that they need to be able to conclude the inquest for them. So in summary, the take-home bit of information that I want to share is it's really important that everybody diagnosed with mesothelioma in the UK will be entitled to some form of payment. I know that some people say to me, well, I haven't been exposed to asbestos, or I don't know where I came into contact with asbestos. It makes no difference whatsoever. We are able to get some type of payment for a mesothelioma patient regardless. So we just ask people that once they've been diagnosed, either contact ourselves or a member of the Asbestos Victims Support Groups Forum for advice, and we will help everybody in the best way we possibly can. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn. That was great. Really liked hearing about all the things you do, particularly the Zoom meetings sound like a great time. Next, I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Sarah Rowcliffe, who'll be talking about the emotional and practical support available to those whose lives have been affected by cancer. Sarah is a charity ambassador for Romsey Cancer Support Centre, Jane Scarth House. She's been involved with the charity for 6 years and trained as a volunteer befriender before she became part of the staff team. Her job involves connecting with medical professionals and other key organisations to ensure that they are aware of the wonderful range of free services available for cancer patients and their families. Sarah is also an experienced and accredited Macmillan trainer and has facilitated many Macmillan Hope courses in recent years. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon. As Nicola said, I represent Romsey Cancer Support Centre, Jane Scarth House. And my job today is to tell you a little bit about our organisation, and then to explain how you can access the HASAG talking therapy service, as well as other support. Jane Scarth House is based in Romsey in Hampshire, but thankfully we are able to help and support people in a much wider area. The beauty of remote services via telephone or online is that they are safely accessible to anyone, no matter where they live. And actually, over the last few months, we've proved that, because we've been able to speak to some people that we would never have been able to connect with previously, all over the south of England, somebody in Wales, and last week somebody who was in the Netherlands. We've been established now for 25 years. This year we're celebrating our silver anniversary, and we would normally be welcoming many visitors to our drop-in centre for patients and their families. Lots of things are usually available, and to give you a flavour, they include things like relaxing complementary therapies, things like reflexology, aromatherapy, Reiki, Indian head massage, and things like meditation, support groups, and even courses to help people get back on track. However, as with any organisation, this year things are a bit different, and we've had to change and adapt our services accordingly. We have added some new group activities that can safely be done, things like art for wellbeing classes. We do some craft projects that people can get involved with over the post. We've done some walking groups as well, just so that people can get together in a safe way. We still provide information and signposting. We're aligned to Macmillan and provide all of their booklets and brilliant information there. We offer befriending and telephone support as well, and we're open 5 days a week from 10 till 4:30. We also have 3 very experienced counsellors that are available for appointments, and they're at the moment doing their appointments by telephone or online. It's always good to talk, and this is especially true at the moment when things can seem so unfamiliar, frightening and challenging. And our friends and family are always there for us. And of course, we need to remember to look after them too, which is why our services are available for family members too. Sometimes it can be helpful, though, to talk to somebody who is not so close to you or your situation. Here, you can safely explore your thoughts and feelings in a confidential environment, and also at your pace. There may be opportunities as well to develop your own strategies for helping to cope in more difficult times that might be ahead. HASAG have a panel of experienced and well-chosen counsellors that are available for you. And I'm pleased to say that Jane Scarth House is actually part of that scheme. In order to access these services, this is what you should do. So firstly, contact HASAG to be given a reference number and access to the panel. Then review the panel and choose who you would like to work with. You then just contact your chosen counselling service and quote the reference number, and a convenient appointment will then be made for you. It's really as simple as that. So the message really from me is that there is a lot of support out there. So please do get in touch and we'll be delighted to help you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Really enjoyed hearing about those activities. That's fantastic. I'd like to introduce you to our 4th and final speaker, Anne Moylan, who will be providing us with an update on clinical trials. Anne is a mesothelioma clinical nurse specialist who qualified in 1984, and after working in the UK and abroad, started working in the respiratory department in Portsmouth in 1999. She was appointed as lung cancer nurse specialist in 2004 and is based at the Queen Alexandra Hospital in Portsmouth. Working within a team of clinical nurse specialists, she has always had a special interest in mesothelioma. She became the 4th Mesothelioma UK clinical nurse specialist in 2014, and her post is also part funded by HASAG. Anne is a key worker for mesothelioma patients in Portsmouth, which has one of the highest incidence of the disease in the country. She went on to be appointed as team leader for the South in September 2016 and enjoys her varied role. Over to you, Anne. I think you're just on mute, Anne.
We're still not used to this IT and virtual world, are we? Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be able to talk to you today. So back in March, when the world was turned on its head, and certainly for cancer, I think it became a very difficult and scary place. Treatments for cancer were not exactly stopped. People who were having treatment tended to carry on with what they were having. But as Helen said earlier, new treatments needed to be considered very, very carefully amongst a kind of risk and benefit scenario. And into that really fell the clinical trials. Because when we're doing clinical trials, we are looking to see how a medication works, either alongside another medication that we're already using, or as a new treatment, and therefore there are always some unknowns. This made the decision to carry on with a clinical trial really, really difficult. And as a result, pretty much all of the clinical trials, especially in the mesothelioma world, were stopped. As soon as we could, there was a real drive to get things open again. And up and down the country, most of the centres that had trials open have managed to restart those trials. Certainly not all of them, and the picture is changing all the time. We find it very difficult to keep up with the changes as mesothelioma nurses. So actually, probably the best way for people seeking to access a clinical trial will be either through your clinical team, but if you're not sure that they are aware of the current landscape of trials, or if you want some expert advice from a mesothelioma nurse, please do get in contact with our information line. The mesothelioma nurses up and down the country have a very active WhatsApp group, and if somebody on the information line asks us a question from a region that perhaps we're not working in, so I might get a call. I had a call on Tuesday afternoon from somebody up in Cheshire. So, you know, accessing the absolute information for that region can be difficult, but just putting a question on our WhatsApp group gets you a very swift answer about what is available to people at that current time. And in the same way, trials that have closed are reopening slowly, but most of the centres that had trials now do have most of them back open again. I think going forward, new trials might be slightly more tricky, but there is certainly a landscape as varied as possible. I think with treatment, as Helen said, there still is a little bit of a balance between ensuring benefit and against side effects, really. I think most people, when we know that we can't cure mesothelioma, really want to maintain their quality of life. So you might find that your clinical team has an in-depth discussion with you about the risk and benefits to you of any given particular treatment. There's also been a lot in the press lately about people not accessing care at this particular time due to fear. And certainly I've seen that in my own practice, that people have been absolutely terrified about coming to hospital. And I really would just like to say, as Helen did earlier, that we are doing everything that we can to mitigate those risks. And very much in a similar way as Southampton have done, hospitals up and down the country are working really hard to make sure that people are safe and protected while they're with us. People avoiding going to their GPs in the first place, I think, has become a bit of a problem, or not even being able to access their GP in the same way. And we are concerned within the mesothelioma world that people are at home with symptoms, some of which might sound very much like COVID symptoms, cough and shortness of breath, tiredness. They can all be part of this awful virus that is with us at the moment. But I think if it goes on and if it feels different to you than a cough that maybe you've had before, if going up the stairs you find that you have to stop halfway or you're not quite making it there, whereas couple of weeks you were, it's very definitely worth persisting with your GP. And I know that those calls can take a long time to get through, and the e-consult process can be quite tricky. But do persist, because we are at the hospitals waiting to see you and waiting to help you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. That's great. Really appreciate that update. I have a few questions from just patients that I've been chatting to. This might be one more, I suppose, for Helen or Anne, just to give us their sort of insight into this. People who were perhaps diagnosed very early on in the pandemic often weren't diagnosed as a result of a biopsy, but perhaps radiologically instead. Do you foresee there being any issue with their treatment later on? Or do you think they might be invited back into the hospital for an actual biopsy? Has there been any change in the way that people are actually reaching the confirmation of the diagnosis? Oh, Anne, sorry, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Not that I've been aware of, no. I have to say that we have carried on doing biopsies. I don't know that any biopsies have stopped for us at all. The only reason we tend to go for a radiological diagnosis is if somebody isn't fit for treatment, particularly because, you know, there are people that present to us who are already too unwell. And I think there's often a misunderstanding amongst people that you actually have to be quite well to have chemotherapy or immunotherapy or even radiotherapy to a degree. And if you aren't well, that those treatments can actually have a detrimental effect on your health and make you more unwell. What about Southampton, Helen? Has it been the same there?
Absolutely the same. We've still been doing the biopsies where possible, but again, like Anne, the radiological diagnosis are often done where people they're either not well enough to even have the biopsy in the first place or not well enough to have treatment, so we wouldn't pursue it.
Would that be someone who was perhaps presenting as performance status 3, for example? Is that when you might? Yeah, okay, that's great. Just out of interest, Helen, what's sort of your turnaround time at the moment? Because I know you said that before someone's admitted and directed to a ward, they would undergo the COVID testing. How long does that usually take?
It's been quite fast. We developed a test that I think in some very urgent cases can get back in 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
I was COVID tested yesterday. I put my test in about 10:30. I don't know when it was collected. And I got the result back about 2:30 in the afternoon.
Wow, that's really good.
Can I just add in there, Nicola, that if people are coming in for a procedure, they need to be COVID swabbed before they come in.
48 hours before?
Or, well, we've gone to 72 hours actually. Okay. And we give them a number. We always say to them, if you have any problems booking your test, come back to us. And I've never had anybody come back to me. And the test results have always been available when they turn up at the hospital for their procedure.
Fantastic. And again, this is a question that I'm asked a lot. It'd be really good to have your input as well, is that people often ask with the immunotherapy type treatment, because it's not an immunosuppressant, that would you expect then that the side effects are much less than with your usual standard chemotherapy?
Yes and no. So it does still come with some possible side effects, but the risk we deem is less in the current pandemic, because with chemotherapy you're suppressed your immune system, and with immunotherapy not so. So it's a balance. But the possible side effects would be discussed with you before you embarked on the consent of the treatment.
And the reason that nivolumab was chosen over any of the other immunotherapies that might have an impact on mesothelioma is due to its lower side effect profile and the fact that it's only given once every 4 weeks. So you've got a longer time in between before you have your next treatment.
How does that compare to pembrolizumab then?
So pembrolizumab is given every 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just deemed that nivolumab does have this lower side effect profile. So that's the reasoning for NICE approving it second line. That approval is valid until the spring. We are really hopeful that will not be reversed. And I think it might be difficult to reverse it because, you know, once people have had access to it on the NHS, I'm not quite sure how you could take that away, but that's a personal opinion and certainly not written in stone.
Excellent. So well, fingers crossed. Lynn, you were hinting before that obviously everything you do, you try and get benefits in a timely way. Have you found that any of the kind of the process of applying for those benefits has been impacted by coronavirus, the pandemic? I'm specifically thinking about some issues I know patients have had with industrial injuries disablement benefit. What's your experience of that?
The experience is that mesothelioma patients aren't affected in the same way as anybody that's diagnosed with a benign condition. So the mesothelioma is a turnaround in exactly the same time. It takes between 3 and 4 weeks for the money to be paid directly into a bank account. There's something called easement as well at the moment. So if there's difficulty in gaining a signature, we now have permission to sign those documents. But as far as any benign conditions are concerned, and I'm thinking of pleural thickening and asbestosis, it's stopped altogether. So at the moment, the Department of Work and Pensions are receiving the applications for industrial injuries disablement benefit and the Pneumoconiosis Workers' Compensation Act. They're registering that that's arrived and doing nothing at all. As far as we're aware of at the moment, medical services is closed. And if they're not able to gain any medical information about a particular patient, then the file is just left. So we're campaigning along with the other support groups around the country to try and get this sorted out, because many other benefits where medical advice needs to be sought, they're being sorted out, so we can't quite understand why these aren't. So it's a work in progress at the moment, unfortunately.
It's a bit frustrating, isn't it? Sarah, you talked about some of the online activities that you run at the Jane Scarth House, sort of art for wellbeing, meditation, craft to connect. Can you just tell us a bit more about how that works kind of in practical terms? So does everyone kind of agree on a project beforehand and you source your own crafting things, or how does that work?
One of our therapists who would normally do our lovely relaxing aromatherapy is very gifted at crafting. So she designs these little projects, and she actually sends them out to various clients throughout the south of England, and they all make it, and then they have a Zoom meeting or a telephone call to discuss it afterwards. So they're quite often cards of various types and things like that. So, but she sends all of the materials that are needed in a little envelope so that everybody's got everything they need.
Oh, that sounds really fun. And what would be the best way of sort of signing up for that if we have anyone listening in who wants to sort of take part?
It's just a case of getting in touch with the charity. So our main number is 01794 830 374, and we can give you all the details for either the craft, the art for wellbeing, or any of our other services.
Fantastic, thanks. And again, maybe a question probably for Lynn and Sarah, but how have you found people's response to the talking therapy that you offer? Has there been quite a good sort of uptake on that? Because I imagine it's particularly difficult for people at home now having that diagnosis.
So we introduced initially a pilot scheme, which was just based in Hampshire. And just in the last 2.5, 3 months, we've had 30 people take up the opportunity for talking therapies. 14 of those they're actively in counselling at the moment, and the sessions are via Zoom or telephone, because some of these people are patients, and we're concerned about the fact that they're shielding and so on. So it's only been via the internet or telephone, but we're in the process of getting our ducks in a row to be able to offer the service right the way across our region. So we've just finished interviewing the counsellors across the whole of the south of England, and we're introduced different lists for different areas, geographical areas, so that no patient or their loved ones have to travel too far to see a counsellor when the world gets back to some kind of normality and we're able to see people face to face. So it's been really, really well received. We've had some amazing feedback from those people that have actually finished their counselling, and we're really proud to be able to announce that the National Lottery have now funded us for the next 6 months. So we're fully funded and ready to go if anybody wants to receive any counselling.
Oh, that's amazing. And remind me, that is for cancer patients and their families, is that right?
It is, yeah. It's not just for the patient alone. And from what we see of the people that have asked for the counselling, it does tend to be the carer or their loved ones. They're the ones that have struggled slightly more during the pandemic with the isolation after somebody's been diagnosed. So yeah, just to reiterate, it's not just for the patient, it's for the family as a whole. It's a holistic approach.
I think it's quite hard, as you said, for carers at home, because they sort of have to put up on this kind of tough persona to cope with everyday life. And it's really important for them to have that outlet, because, you know, they aren't able to get out and meet friends as they perhaps normally would, because we're all pretty much stuck at home, really. So I think it's fantastic that they got someone to talk to, really. Helen and Anne, for the patients that are coming into the hospital, do any of them have issues wearing the face masks or coverings because of their breathlessness? Is that an issue at all for them, do you find?
A little bit sometimes, and we're as relaxed as we can be within the safety limits, really. We're lucky that our consulting rooms are quite big, and we are really limiting the number of people in the waiting room. They can only bring one person with them at the moment to appointments, and a lot more have gone back online since the second wave started. We had started to see a lot more people face to face, but we've gone back far more to telephone consultations, unfortunately. There are lanyards around nationally. The Wessex Cancer Trust do one, and I do believe you can buy them in some of the supermarkets and even B&Q, I think. And they have like a plastic envelope at the bottom where you can write exempt or something to kind of give the idea, because I think people find it quite difficult being asked about it, and there is a lot of passion and fear out there, I think, when people aren't wearing masks. But it's difficult because it does restrict your breathing a little bit. I think we all find that, and it, you know, when people are short of breath, it's difficult. So yes, in a way.
And for me, exactly the same. But we don't police it with our patients if they can't wear it. We allow them to be exempt.
And are there sort of options at the moment? So do you say to your patients you have a choice between telephone consultation or coming in person? Is that an open, so if they don't feel that they are able to come in, they've got that option?
Yes, absolutely. And some patients are actually very, very nervous about coming into the hospital itself. And to help with their anxiety, we offer them different modes. Actually, some of my quite elderly patients are the ones that are quite keen for the video. Some of my younger patients are the ones that prefer the telephone. So I think going forward, this is actually going to be quite a good option alongside the face-to-face.
Fantastic.
What we're doing, the first appointment, so after you've been referred by your GP, is face-to-face unless somebody really doesn't want it to be, along with coming back for the results of those tests that you might be sent for, because we think that those two appointments in particular carry a lot of information and a lot of new information, difficult information sometimes, and that they're better done face-to-face. After that, they can opt for what they want to a degree, but if it's deemed more safe or better to do it on the phone, we will try and push that a little bit. If they see an oncologist for treatment, normally again the first appointment will be face to face. But it's all about safety, and if it is not safe, and sometimes you need to examine people, sometimes you need to see where the pain is or see what's happening rather than actually do it on the phone. So it's all about the safety as well, really.
I think it's the same, you know, we're adapting in a similar way to Lynn described, not seeing patients face to face, and it is difficult, isn't it? Because you have to build up that relationship. It's that bit more tricky, really, I think, than visiting them in person. But it's a new world that we're all getting used to. Lynn, how are you finding the switch to moving your coffee mornings, which I attended regularly before? They were fantastic. How are you finding the switch to in-person events to the Zoom coffee mornings? Has that been something that people have been able to embrace? Have you had technological difficulties? How has that gone?
There's a lot of you're on mute, that's for sure. It's been okay. It's not the same. I'm sure Anne and Helen will agree that it's okay in the interim, but nothing replaces seeing people face to face. And as you've been at our coffee mornings before COVID, Nicola, they're a really happy place where people can come and meet other people in exactly the same situation as themselves. It's very relaxed. And the Zoom coffee mornings, they've gone well. We've had some technology problems. People can't find their camera and so on. But they do work. They do work. I think in the future we might think about doing that for people that just can't get to any of our coffee mornings in the future. But I think that the whole of the team would agree that we'd love to get back to face, but we'd obviously not do that until it was completely safe to do so. And likewise with speaking to people over the phone to fill out all of the benefits and so on. That's been a bit tricky as well, and it's difficult sometimes for some patients to hear us and so on. So it's all a work in progress, but I feel as a charity that we reacted really well to the pandemic and there was no interruption in service, and that's something that I feel really proud of.
Absolutely, no, that's fantastic. I think as Sarah was saying as well, you know, we might find when things do go back to normal a bit that actually we do continue offering some of those services in that way, because it means that, you know, there's no geographical boundary, and you know, it's fantastic that she has people from the Netherlands joining in. You know, that's great, and that's giving a lot of people access to services they might not otherwise have, which is really good. Can't see any more questions have come in. So I mean, thank you so much to Helen, Lynn, Sarah, and our panel today. You guys have all been fantastic, such insightful talks, and hopefully it provided some reassurance to people watching that although COVID may have made things a bit more tricky, all of us are here to help you following a mesothelioma diagnosis, and you're not alone, and we are here for you. Thank you very much again to our speakers. If I can encourage you to go onto the Urban Mitchell website, you'll find details of our previous and upcoming webinars. Also, I know it's not the most exciting thing, but we have posted a feedback link, and it'd be really helpful for us if you could please just take a couple of minutes to complete this. And it just leaves me to say, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much again for joining us for this webinar. Thanks.